day of competition for Paris 2024. Yesterday was Super Saturday, which was as good as expected, with hugely important moments in the world of sporting. 3, we can talk about Montmartre, that offered the extraordinary spectacle for cycling, with an amazing amount of people watching this. I don't even know if that's an Olympic record, but there was hundreds of thousands of people there. Yesterday, for athletics, for 100 meters, Julienne Arfred had the first prize for Sainte Lucie, which is also a moment in history that we will never forget. And then, of course, judo, where we had the Champ de Mars, with this extraordinary final where we had France and Japan. Just to the very end, we didn't know who was going to win. So what about judo? Well, it's finished. But what about the transition of sites? As you know, that in Paris 2024, we've decided to make the most of possible of not traveling too much, so we have as many events as possible on the one side. So we're now in the transition, so we've got Champ de Mars, we'll soon have wrestling, after judo, and for the Grand Palais, it's going to be taekwondo soon, it's going to take over from fencing. Pierre Mauroy in Lille will soon have handball. So let's not forget that there are still tickets to be bought for handball for 24 euros for the quarterfinals in handball. And after the final in tennis, it will be boxing that will take over at Roland Garros. So here you can see that these sites are transforming themselves and being able to welcome new events. A lot of things to be done today. 27 disciplines on 23 different sites. So let's move on to today's subject. So you've got Alexandre Mourinon-Condé, who's Director of Volunteers. Donc Alexandre Mourinon-Condé, thank you very much for being here. And we've got 2 volunteers here, so we're really delighted to have them here. They've come along to be with us. So we've got Rosa, who is part of the Spanish delegation, and Fouzi, who is head of the spectators delegation here at La Défense. So thank you so much for you two. And I'm sure that Fouzi, you can confirm that the atmosphere is amazing at La Défense. So we're going to look at what this program means.
Merci beaucoup, Anne. Bonjour à tous.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you to one and all. So we're 1 week into all of these amazing events. We see these extraordinary images around the world, these events that are taking place in these extraordinary places. And I'm one of these people who is aware of the importance of these volunteers playing a role in this extraordinary atmosphere. And I would like to take this occasion to thank all of the volunteers. There's some of them here, so thank you very much, because you're really contributing to this extraordinary atmosphere at these games. As well as the Paralympics, we're going to have 45,000 volunteers here across the Olympics and the Paralympics. So these 45,000 volunteers really are what we wanted them to be. They epitomize this Paris 2024 program. You can see they're fully committed to doing what they want to do. They want to also show the diversity of what we want Paris 24 to be. And you will see there are volunteers. There are just as many females as males. But diversity doesn't just stop there. We've also worked with the French sporting organization. For example, volunteers is part and parcel of the sporting world in France, because we've got 16 million people in France who play sport every day. And this is because volunteers play an important role in making this possible. We also want to make sure that all of the French territory is used. So 100 départements are being represented that come from 150 countries as well. We've got volunteers that come therefore from abroad. We also have a figure that we're very proud of. So 5%, more than 5% of our volunteers are disabled. And that was also for us very important to bring on board as many disabled people as possible. And now that we're talking about diversity, it's also important that we've got every single category of age of people. So you've got people who are younger, 10% are older than 60, and between 25 and 60 we have the bulk of our volunteers. I think our youngest is 16, and perhaps the oldest is 94. So you can see that we've got myriad different groups of people. What's important to reiterate is that the volunteers are fully committed to this, and half of our volunteers, when they will be at the Paralympics, will already have been volunteers at the Olympics. Of course, when you bring this diverse team together, you have to prepare it, of course. And so we have to make sure that they're able to do what you're able to see now for a few days. And for this, we put a lot of energy into preparing them and training them so that these volunteers were able to study various modules, whether it was online. And there were 800 training modules that were created. And we had 94 sessions of training on these various competition sites purely for the Olympics, with a very high level of participation. Yeah, it was a very good level of participation. And we can feel that they're really committed to this. And you can feel their commitment from the very beginning of when they were wanting to apply. We had 100,000 people wanting to be a volunteer. And the recruitment started in 2023, as I said earlier. So we had the help of the sporting associations, various entities in the town, and we wanted to reach out to the general public, and this allowed us to see so many volunteers, people who were interested not just in France, but also from abroad. In fact, many of our volunteers are international and not just French. So we're really, really delighted and proud to be here. So the volunteers here, there are three types. The ones you see, first of all, the ones you see everywhere, the ones who are part and parcel of the experience of the public, whether it's the spectators, the journalists, or the delegations. And they're basically there to welcome them and show them where to go. And they're maybe 60% of what we do. And then there's about 30% of our volunteers that are concentrated on, for example, on the sports performance. So we're thinking here about the volunteers who are actually on the site, for example, in athletics that are going to be starting. So if you look here, they're the ones who are put the starting blocks in place, for example. And then you've also got volunteers, so there's a percentage, around 5%, who have maybe seen you. You've maybe seen them, they've given you accreditation, and they are responsible also for giving the uniforms, for example, to referees. So basically we have a whole range of activities for these referees. I'm sure they're all going to have beautiful stories to tell. And maybe the best thing then for me is to give the floor to some of our volunteers. Maybe Rosa, can you describe some of your experience?
Être volontaire des Jeux Olympiques, c'était un rêve que j'avais depuis
an Olympic volunteer was a dream that I'd had since Barcelona in 92. I love France, and I'm really delighted to be a volunteer here. And really, my experience has just been amazing. When I look at the staff that we have at the Olympic Village, it's just fantastic. All of the staff, all of the volunteers, I mean, really, absolutely brilliant. And, you know, so welcoming. They have so much patience. They have patience, you know, for everyone all the time. They're there. And they always try and help us to find a solution when we have a problem. When we had the volunteer convention, I was thinking about what Tony Estanguet said to us. You have to be solution finders, solucionadores. The interpreter apologizes for the Spanish, but that's what he was telling us, to try to always find a solution, do it with a smile. So, I mean, it was just brilliant. You know, So we are a CNO assistant, so I help the Spanish delegation, and it's really been fantastic to meet people like Carlos Alcaraz, Rafael Nadal, to mention but two, but you know, just fantastic, and meet all the tennis players, Christy, Sarah. Every time, you know, we have a success, you know, for our country. We are so happy to be a volunteer, so happy.
Merci beaucoup, Rosa. Fouzi, tu veux nous parler de ton
Thank you,
expérience à
Rosa.
Paris La
Fouzi,
Défense
do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience at La Défense? Yes, with pleasure. I'm delighted to be here. And, you know, very, very grateful also to be here. But maybe why I'm here, what's the origin? I signed up in 2023 through my company, and many people looked at me and went, ooh, why are you doing that? And I do not regret for 1 second. I think I've been incredibly lucky to be at Paris La Défense for swimming. And on top of that, I'm also involved with the spectators. So what does that mean? Every morning, the challenge is to welcome 17,000 spectators. They have to come into this site. It's quite atypical because it's a rugby stadium, but it's also a concert hall. So the objective then is to make sure that all the spectators are able to be there for the first event, and I divide my work, well, in 2 ways. So, for example, you have to welcome them, then lead them to where they need to be, ensure that you see who need more help because they have mobility problems, and then we have maybe 100 spectators that we need to make sure that they're happy. And, you know, you can see when these medals are given out, we have to make sure that everyone has an unforgettable experience. And I think that's been the case for the majority or all of the volunteers that I've had the pleasure to be involved with. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's maybe the right time to thank these volunteers who help us also in the running of this press conference.
First, on the theme of the day, please.
Bonjour Alain Mercier, Franc-Jeu. Ma question porte sur les volontaires russes. Je sais qu'il y en a certains qui avaient été acceptés puis finalement refusés.
I'd like to ask a question about Russian volunteers. Some of them were accepted and then they were refused access. Can you tell us what the situation is today? As in fact, we mentioned when you apply, the problem with this, as I said earlier, the possibility was open to everyone. There were many, many countries that put forward applicants. Now, of course, there's a process for recruiting, and we've already mentioned this in the past. We work, as for all accredited games, with the agencies, the authorities of the French state, and they ultimately take a decision as to whether we can give accreditation or not to a volunteer. So, of course, it is, of course, the authorities, the French authorities, that will always have the final word on who becomes part of this volunteer program. Are there any?
Okay, merci.
We have few, but there are some.
Other question, yes. So.
Une autre question? Another question?
Bonjour. Je voudrais savoir si vous aviez des précisions sur le nombre de spectateurs hier. Est-ce que vous savez où ils étaient réunis pour le cyclisme? C'était majoritairement en dehors de Paris, à Paris. Merci.
Alors, c'était pas sur le thème.
Numbers of spectators.
J'ai pas de précision. C'était le long de la route.
I don't have any details about this. I think you'd have to ask the prefecture of police. Are there any other questions on the topic of the day about the volunteers?
Merci à tous. Oh, yes, sorry. Sorry.
Thank you. Wakako Yuki from the Yomiuri Shimbun. To the leader. The diversity, yes. I went to many venues and met many different, look like nationalities, as well as frontiers with impairments. How does those diversity, as well as you have to work in a team, brought experience for enlightening people amongst frontier, as well as how people involved in the games. Any experience from the actual frontiers would be very welcome. Also, one more, the knowledge base. Of course, volunteer people would have learning curve, but when you approach to a new venue asking for entrance, things so forth, often you are directed to somewhere else and then directed to somebody else. And then the answer would never come. So could you tell us a little bit of what is the education, the accumulation of experience there? Thank you.
Pardon. En termes de formation et d'accompagnement des volontaires pour les préparer au mieux à leur mission,
to the volunteers to be able to prepare them for their mission. We had a number of different stages. First of all, we had a rally of all the volunteers to bring everybody to Paris La Défense Arena on the 23rd of March. And those who couldn't come, the others were able to follow online. As a result, we were to be able to put them into the atmosphere of the games, to tell them what the DNA of Paris 2024 was. Then they were subject to online training on the major issues concerning the games. And they were also provided with a guide for volunteers, which provided them with additional information. Following that, they also were given a module of training which detailed their particular mission. If, for example, if you're welcoming spectators to a stadium, they were given online training which allowed them to be able to see exactly what they were going to be expected to do. There was also a webinar which was devoted to their site, so that they knew exactly where they were going to be working, and they were shown the functioning of the site. They could then discover the people they would be working alongside. And to finish off, they attended a further training program on site, on the competition site, that is. We had 94 training sessions that were carried out on the different competition sites, as well as non-competition sites within the framework of the Olympics. And there were also briefing sessions which allowed us to provide them with a maximum amount of information. They were also provided with a second guide. The first guide was a general guide. The second was specific to their work site, with information about access points to the site in particular. I hope I've answered your question.
Tu veux rebondir?
Si je rebondis juste sur l'expérience.
Yes, I'd like to take up the experience of the heads of team working at La Défense. As far as diversity and inclusion are concerned, and the number of persons who need to be coordinated, I was fortunate enough to have persons who had reduced mobility, but also students, as well as people at the other end of the age scale, retirees. And Paris 2024 really focused on being able to have the necessary management capacity at the beginning of the process of recruitment. I was asked what I did in life, for example. I was asked whether I'd already managed teams. Did I speak English? So I'm very fortunate to be one of the people working in the Deloitte agency. There are 22 nationalities in my team, and when you're a volunteer and you are operating where all the volunteers are really full of goodwill, then we're very fortunate to be able to have a really extraordinary experience where we're all working for the same goal, to ensure that spectators get an unforgettable experience. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You are released if you'd like to sit. You're very welcome to stay, but I think if you want to leave, if you want to sit here, that's also welcome. But thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you very much to
thank you very much.
Volunteers in general. Okay, let's move on to other questions now. Happy to take other questions. Yeah, starting with the gentleman there.
Hi, Jean Paget from Reuters. A question for Anne. We got your statement on the cancellation of the training swim for the triathlon. Can you please share the numbers with us, the latest numbers you have, and also what is your level of confidence that the event will take place? Thank you.
So yeah, we took the decision to cancel the swim familiarization for the mixed triathlon. We've shared the information last night in order to avoid late communication to the athlete. It follows the rain that occurred in the last days. We're expecting improvement in the next hours. I don't have the last figures, but we are expecting improvements regarding the weather forecast. And as we've seen, sun, heat have a very positive impact. So we're hopeful that we can organize the competition tomorrow, and we will take the decision as planned tomorrow morning regarding the last samples.
Yeah. Another question? It's a bit of a slow Sunday so far. Yes. Question over there.
Hi, it's a question for Mark. It's Mike Keegan here from the Daily Mail. There was a story, Mark, that came out last night that basically said that the IBA had sent a letter to the IOC in June of last year. And in the letter, it gave detail on the tests that have now been reported quite widely, and the fact that one of the boxers had shown up an XY chromosome. I just wondered what the IOC's response was to that, and whether that letter is legitimate, and whether the IOC actually have been shown the detail from those tests.
Well, first off, it won't surprise you to know that I'm going to repeat the line that those tests are not legitimate tests. So there was indeed a letter. Yeah, I can confirm that. But the tests themselves, the process of the tests, the ad hoc nature of the tests are not legitimate. And you'll also expect me to tell you that I'm not going to discuss the individual intimate details of athletes in public, which I think is pretty disgraceful for those who've leaked that material. Frankly, to be put in that position must be awful, on top of all of the social media harassment that these athletes have had. As I say, we did receive a letter. As I've been through in chapter and verse yesterday, and the day of President yesterday, me the day before, and the day before that, the way that material was shared is against legal, ethical, and all other measures, and you only have to look at Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, Sports Rights Alliance, who also will tell you that these are severe attacks on the rights of these women involved. So I'm not going to comment. A letter was sent, the testing, the method of the testing, the idea of the testing, which happened kind of overnight. None of it is legitimate and therefore doesn't deserve any response, particularly not in detail.
Sorry, very wary of confidentiality, sure. But can you share what is behind you saying that this test does not meet, the criteria?
There's no reason for the test. The test was, as far as we can see, taken arbitrarily. Decision which I've seen reported related also to the competition where one of the boxers beat a Russian boxer. Now, I don't know if there's any truth in I know that the boxer did meet and beat a Russian in that competition. But the very fact that the decision to do the testing was taken on the spot there, under what purpose, under what the test was for, I don't know. As I say, as far we managed to do away with sex testing in the last century, so not quite sure what the foundation for the testing was. We don't really know kind of very much more about it than that. But yes, we did receive a letter, but we won't deal with the contents of that letter. Yes, lady at the back there.
Are you confident that the rules, the gender eligibility rules that are in place for this boxing competition would withstand, if they were taken to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, that they would stand up to that test by a rival athlete?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't say. I would think that as I say, those eligibility rules have been in place for 2016, 2020, and now they've continued to be in place. These two boxers, to repeat again, born as girls, registered as female passports, have fought at a senior level for 6 years with no issues. So I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know how CAS works, but I would think there's quite a lot of precedence that would be the case. Yeah, gentleman here.
Christoph Becker from Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung in Frankfurt. On that letter, you're saying you received it in June 2023. I believe on June 7th, recognition was withdrawn from IBA. At that point, did you have the letter then, or did it
I
come
don't know
to your
about the
office
time.
after?
To be honest, I don't know about the exact timing. I can look
Okay.
at that.
And then a question to Anne on the Seine, which is supposed to feature the marathon swimming later in the week. At what point would the IOC decide on whether to hold that race? Would that be a decision on the day as well, or would it be a decision that has to be taken earlier, as you know, if you want to get to the optional venue at the rowing? Would you decide on that a day prior or two? Thanks.
It really depends on the context, and we know we are doing a daily test on the quality of the River Seine, so it really depends on the last result we have. We took the decision yesterday evening regarding the last result we had, but the plan is that the decision is taken on the morning.
Yeah, Reuters down there.
Question for Mark. After the first day of competitions in the boxing and the reactions we saw there, we've seen much more positive reactions coming from the athletes themselves regarding this matter. How do you see this shift in the atmosphere, especially in the boxing community, and also from the Hungarians who decided not to go and take it up with other bodies? Thank you.
I mean, I think as ever, it's, in my view, it's when kind of social media meets reality. And I think a lot of people actually, when they started to read the facts behind the case and read the actual journalism around the case, when people discovered the truth around the case, then it became much more nuanced. Of course, there are very many different views, but you start to see that actually it isn't, unfortunately, we love in social media, don't we, that everything is black and white, and there's an answer for everything that can be done immediately overnight. It's not the case. These issues are much more nuanced than that, but I think, and it's more difficult to explain very important nuances about human rights, about data protection, about the right to privacy. Those are very difficult things to write about in 140 characters or whatever the character limit is now. I think they've done away with it some time ago. But I mean, I think when you start to get a proper informed debate, you actually start to see people understanding the issue more. They can still have their views and they're entitled to their views, but I think that's the reason why it's become a much more balanced debate, and much less a kind of a shouting match that you tend to get these days on social media. Yeah, gentleman here, and we'll come back across.
Jay Busby, Yahoo Sports. You had mentioned, obviously, this is a very nuanced debate. Will there be a move at some point to move away or to broaden the definition of what is a male and a female beyond just using the passport as kind of the final determination, because that is sort of a straightforward issue, a straightforward document? Is there a move to at some point after these games, obviously, to broaden that definition beyond simply using the passport as the final definition?
Well, I mean, this is an ongoing debate. I mean, this is not just in boxing. A lot of the federations use the same criteria, and it's a very difficult one. As already mentioned, nobody wants to go back to the days of sex testing. I imagine that there will be discussion about this. There is continuing discussion about this, and yeah, I can imagine that discussion will continue, but I'm not a member of an IF, but I imagine each IF needs to have a look at their own rules and make sure they're happy with them. They were clearly happy with them for these games. And if they, consider that they should discuss them, look at them afterwards, then fine, all well and good. But I wouldn't give them any guidance myself, to be honest. Yeah, gentleman there.
Thank you. I'm Jun Kaneko from Mainichi Newspaper of Japan. My question is about COVID-19. We have seen some cases that some athletes tested positive for COVID-19 so far. So if you have any data, like how many athletes or coaches tested positive for COVID-19, could you tell us? And also, what kind of measures have you taken to prevent spread of the cases? Thank you.
I take the question. So just to say that we are carefully monitoring the health situation in close contact with the national health authorities, not only COVID, any health situation. So we don't have specific data on COVID, but at the national level we have feedbacks from the authorities. So if you have questions on the spread of COVID in France, you should contact them. And regarding the advice we share to the athletes, obviously we regularly remind anyone, the athletes, the delegation, to follow the good practice, to wear masks, to use hand sanitizers, etc., etc.
Yeah, there was a gentleman here. Sorry, you've been waiting a while.
No problem. No problem. Jerry Lawton from the Daily Star. I was just wondering if you had any comment on the story overnight regarding the Australian triathlon coach, Brett Sutton, convicted of sex abuse as a coach, apparently banned by his body in Australia, and yet appearing here under, I believe, Chinese accreditation, giving interviews to the world, shall we say. I was just wondering what the IOC's situation was regarding him.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that this person is no longer here at the Games, that they have left the Games. In the first instance, I think it's an issue for the Chinese Olympic Committee, and then obviously also the Federation would need to get involved. Going forward, I can tell you that we will obviously look into this issue. There are many safeguarding issues, safeguarding facilities here and people here involved in safeguarding, but obviously the vetting and the registration and so on, accreditation of people, is part of a 4-year Olympic process, which depends on the work of the National Olympic Committees and the IFs. We can only build on that during the Games. So whilst we have safeguarding measures in place, quite strict safeguarding measures in place, unfortunately, things do occur from time to time, and obviously we'll look into this. But I think your first port of call would be to the National Olympic Committee, who is employing this person.
Just on that, it relates also to the Steven van der Velde case that we've had. He's still here, obviously. Could you just explain to the layman why the IOC doesn't seem to be in charge of its own competition and you defer everything to the national? I mean, just explain that for a layman,
Sure.
Why that happens.
Okay, so I mean, the National Olympic Committee is like a super team. So if you have a team of football, for a football tournament, it's the football team that chooses the players. So in the case of the Dutch team, it would be the Dutch team, the Dutch National Olympic Committee, that would pick the members of their team. Is that, yeah, third one, yeah.
It's all related to the same thing. But on that, I get that. But surely this is your Games. So just because the Dutch national team have picked an individual,
yeah,
it then goes to you, does it?
So we discuss. I mean, I've touched on this 3 or 4 times, but I'm happy to go over it again. Clearly, this was an issue that was discussed with the National Olympic Committee. They assured us that many safeguarding measures are in place, that rehabilitation is in place, that the team themselves are content with the situation. I understand that the athlete is not and has not stayed in the village. And then there's the broader, more philosophical point, I think, that I'm not sure when this crime took place. I think it's more than 10 years ago. That in the end, I think no crime lasts for. No, there is some rehabilitation possible if people accept the guidance and the counselling and so on, and there's safeguarding in place, which we understood is the case. So first and foremost, it's the National Olympic Committee that chooses. Obviously, we have to also be at least content that the situation, as is with this particular athlete, is acceptable. And it seems to be the case for us that is. That's okay? Yep, gentleman here.
Hi there, Adam Blauwright from AFP. This question for Mark, just to come back again on the IBA mandated tests that we've been talking about. I just want to clarify something about you've called them arbitrary and sort of cobbled together in the past. Just to be clear about it, do you reject the findings of that because you think these boxers were unfairly targeted as individuals, or is it a general rejection of those results because you don't believe in sex testing, as you said that you...
It's, I mean, all of the above. I mean, there is...
So they were individually targeted then?
Well, is that what we believe so. I mean, there were 2 athletes who were tested during the middle of a World Championship and carted off and tested.
And they were the only 2 that were tested?
I believe so. I mean, the fact is the process is... As far as we know, those are the only 2. There were suspicions against them, and I need hardly say if we start acting on suspicions against every athlete of whatever, then we go down a very bad route. But there's a whole range of reasons why we won't deal with this. Partly confidentiality, partly medical issues, partly that there was no basis for the test in the first place, and partly data sharing of this is also highly against the rules, international rules. And as I say, if you look at the comments of Human Rights Watch and so on, this is an attack on the rights of those women athletes. So there's a whole range of reasons why we won't deal with them. I think probably first amongst all those is the confidentiality and the right that those women have not to have their lives published across the world without any basis for them to come back or to deal with the issues. Yep, at the back there.
Can I just clarify? Are you saying that there's no place even for testosterone testing to protect the integrity and fairness of?
No, I'm just saying that in this case there wasn't a test in place and there isn't a test in place. It was an arbitrary test put in place. That eligibility test was not part of the 2016 rules, the 2020 rules, or the rules here. So there is no rule. Each federation has to determine their own rules. They know their best, their sports and their disciplines. We leave them to them. They have the eligibility rules, which we linked to when I was first asked about this question 4 or 5 days ago. You can read those online. You can see those eligibility rules. It's up to each federation to come to terms with those.
But in a situation where there's clearly that particular association is not in charge of this competition, so isn't there a place for the IOC to have its own?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we would say is these women have been competing for 6 years at a senior level. They've been competing all their lives actually as boxers, all their young and adult lives as boxers without issue. So I think what we're trying to get at is how are they targeted for this to come about, and how did it first come about at that World Championships in 2023? And is it fair and right that 2 individuals should be targeted in this way, and that we should take decisions in an arbitrary manner based on arbitrary decisions that have come before by a federation that I will remind you has been completely discredited. And I would urge you, if you haven't looked already, it's quite a view, to look at the views published in video by the president of the IBA online. Actually quite shocking, quite undermining of any credibility that you may have had. And if you really believe, looking at those videos and looking at the comments of that president, that we should take anything that they say or anything that they send us with any grain of truth, then I think not you personally, but I think one would be sadly mistaken, not meant to be an attack on you, but I think I would really urge you all to look at the comments of the IBA, and particularly of the president online. They're quite shocking. Yes.
Thanks. You said the other day, Mark, you were happy, or the IOC would be happy to broaden the discussion once the games have finished, if somebody comes up with a scientific, clear scientific approach. We've had this discussion on the issue before in a lot of courts as well. In Caster Semenya's case, the litigation isn't finished. The European Court of Human Rights is still arguing this case, I suppose. There's no final decision yet. How much does the IOC have to take into consideration discussing going forward? How much does the IOC have to take into consideration whatever the European Court of Human Rights will one day decide on the matter regarding Caster Semenya?
Well, that is a specific case about a specific individual, about a specific sport. I mean, obviously we will read and study any findings, and I think the federations will each, in those cases, read and study the findings and see if there's anything appropriate for them. But I think the case does show, as the President said yesterday and I said the day before and the day before that, that this, and I've already said today, that this isn't a case, this isn't a subject where there is a simple black and white answer. We don't have, much as we would all love it, and what the President said yesterday, to repeat, is that could someone come up with a scientific consensus, then we would be happy to work on that and to work with that consensus. Unfortunately, as you've seen over the past few days, there isn't a consensus. There very clearly isn't a consensus, and this is why this is such an impossible area. It's a minefield to work in, and we continue to try to deliver safe and fair and inclusive sport. All those three things can be difficult to come together at times, but we continue to work on those and bring sport and try to keep all of our view on the sport rather than what goes behind it. But it's a tough challenge, and of course we'll take the findings of that court, the federations particularly, I imagine, into account. Yeah, Mike.
Just one follow-up on the actual test itself, Mark. You question the legitimacy of it because of how it came about, and clearly these two were targeted. Do you question also question the legitimacy of the actual test results themselves?
I think the whole process is flawed, and therefore it's not up to me as a spokesperson, not a medical expert, but the whole process, as I understand it, is flawed from the very beginning, from the conception of the test to how the tests were shared with us, how the tests have become public, is so flawed that it's impossible to engage with it. It doesn't mean that there can't be a process in the future, that we can't discuss this, but this specific test, and also with the credibility of the IBA as it is, it doesn't give any credibility to those tests or the method in which those tests were carried out. What? Yeah, we're going to have one more question. Yeah, one more question at the back, as it's a Sunday.
Hi, Mark.
Oh, no, it's 12 o'clock. There we go.
Ed Hula with Hula Sport Communications. Question for Anne. I unfortunately missed the press conference yesterday morning because I was being treated at the clinic at the Hyatt for a case of food poisoning, suffered while eating, right after eating a sandwich at the Grand Palais, ahead of fencing. At the hospital where I was treated, the doctor said that they've had a number of food contamination cases involving Paris 2024 facilities. can you confirm that a number of people who've gotten sick and whether there's any kind of inspection to make sure that food prepared and served to everybody is safe?
Yes, let me first, I wish you're fine and you will be okay. And I'm sorry to hear that you had that problem yesterday. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not aware of other cases, so I cannot confirm what the doctor said to you.
Is it possible to get a listing or a number?
Yeah, we can check.
Because they take our
the
credentials.
medical team if there are other cases that have been reported.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. We will be back again tomorrow when we will have representatives of the Athletes Commission IOC and I think Paris 24 Athletes Commission. Martin will be here. So we'll talk about athletes' experience and all things athletes. Thank you very much again. See you tomorrow.